Hello and welcome to Writing with Steve with me, Steve Evans. In this video we're analysing War Photographer by Carol Ann Duffy, and below we've provided a link to the poem. I have the poem here, so let's start. In War Photographer, Duffy provides a thumbnail sketch of a man who has one of the most dangerous jobs in the world. He has to enter war zones and photograph the horror and carnage there, often being in the middle of battles. Unlike war reporters, he has to be in the thick of the action because he must photograph the death and suffering around him. From the chaos that he witnesses, he has to make some sense and create some order. From the spools of suffering, the graphic image that Duffy provides to describe the film, the reels of film he has, he then, we are told, sets them out in ordered rows. After the terror he has seen, the dark room provides a sanctuary where he can finally be alone. The poet compares the dark room to a place of peace, a place of sanctuary, like a church. We are told the red light softly glows. Duffy compares the photographer to a priest and the process of developing film to a mass. Before the days of digital imaging, the process involved developing the film in trays of chemicals. And there is something mysterious about images appearing from nothing. When Duffy wrote this poem, professional photographers often had a dark room and developed their films there. The first stanza has spiritual overtones, and Duffy uses words from the semantic field of religion. She uses words like priest, church and mass. By doing this, the poet may be suggesting that the photographer sees the film as precious and sacred. And the stanza ends with a quotation from the Bible, from the Old Testament, the book of Isaiah 46, which adds to the spiritual theme. The fact that all flesh is grass reminds us that our bodies are frail and mortal, and we are vulnerable beings. And of course, the war photographer has witnessed our frailty and vulnerability firsthand. Duffy completes the stanza by reeling off the war zones the photographer has visited. It sounds like a liturgy, the words a congregation at church would recite. Belfast, Beirut, Phnom Penh, infamous places of conflict at the time. In the second stanza, the poet develops her theme. The speaker stops being fanciful about the nature of the war photographer's work. It is a job like any other. He has a job to do. The use of the full stop or CAESURA emphasises this point. We are told that solutions slop in trays. Here solutions has a double meaning. The chemicals that develop the film, and solutions meaning answers. The answers slop suggests there are no neat solutions to ending the horror and suffering of war. The word has associations of blood and meat and evoke images of pieces of flesh. We are also told that what the photographer has witnessed has badly affected his health, particularly his state of mind. We are told that his hands often tremble. Ironically, they do not tremble when he is there doing his job with the camera, but only when he returns to rural England and he has time to think about the horror he has seen. By including this detail, the poet reminds us that to do his job, the photographer cannot become emotionally involved in what he is witnessing and photographing. His job requires a coolness and detachment, but once he is back home, he can reflect back on the horrors he has seen, and we assume he has been in incidents when he has nearly died. And what he has seen and what he has been involved in have had a profound effect on him and a detrimental effect on him, as these images come back to haunt him. And Duffy does use the word ghost. We are told that these terrible memories and images are never far away from him. Even in the rural fields of England, he remembers minefields that explode beneath feet, and he remembers fleeing children. He describes these situations as nightmares. And the word nightmares is the use of emotive images and emotive language. So emotive means something that creates an emotional response in the reader and connects with the reader on an emotional level. Duffy also uses the word heat, and this reminds us of some of the exotic locations he has visited, but it also reminds us of the heat of explosives or chemicals burning the children's flesh. We are also reminded of the phrase, the heat of war, and the phrase early in the poem, all flesh is grass. The use of the word heat and flesh again has associations with the iconic image of the young girl in the Vietnam War who has been the victim of a napalm attack. You may recall that the napalm, a burning chemical agent, has completely burnt through her clothes and left her naked and burnt into her flesh, and the young girl is staring into the camera lens of a war photographer, her eyes filled with agony, fear, pain and terror. So the poet here is perhaps making these associations through the use of those two words. We are told that these memories make his hands tremble, and by telling us this, the poet makes us feel sympathy towards the photographer. In the third stanza, the photographer recalls a vivid incident involving his job. The poet presents an incident and shows us what his job entails. The photographer remembers the incident as an image begins to appear as the chemicals develop the film. The image is one of the victims he has photographed, a married man. He describes him as a stranger, but by photographing him, he is no longer a stranger, and a bond of sorts has formed. The word twist suggests a broken body or someone in great agony. And the poet uses another graphic image, this metaphor of a half-formed ghost. Half-formed because he is badly injured and missing limbs, and ghost suggests the stranger is now dead. Half-formed and ghost also suggests the transparent image in the chemical tray as it slowly appears. Yet we are told that he has no time to become emotionally attached. He must get on with his job of recording the incident before him. We are told he does not ask the approval of the dying man's wife to take a photograph, but does what someone must to record these terrible images. The fact that he doesn't ask permission also suggests that the photographer cannot speak the wife's language, but both understand the need for the world to know about the suffering these people endure, and of her husband's death. Duffy also provides one small detail at the end of stanza 3. The photographer remembers the man's blood falling into the dust, and this reveals his attention to detail, his sharp eyes. This is also his curse because he can't forget these hellish images. The final stanza reveals that despite risking his life to take the photographs, his editor and the general public do not really care about the suffering of others. The poet suggests this when she tells us that from the 100 agonies in black and white, only a handful will be chosen. The use of hyperbole, exaggeration, of 100 agonies and emotive language like agonies emphasises the many sufferings the photographer has witnessed. It reminds us of the scale of human suffering around the world. So much so that the editor, ironically, is spoilt for choice. We are told in stanza 4 that the photographs will end up in a Sunday paper and that they will reduce the readers to tears. Duffy uses the phrase prick with tears, but the poet suggests that this will not last long. It is something to occupy the readers between having their bath and lunch. The verb prick suggests pricking their conscience, but this is momentary, and the public move on to mundane and immediate things that preoccupy their lives. Sunday also reintroduces the religious theme, Sunday traditionally being the Christian day of rest and for visiting church. Supplement here is used ironically. Supplement is an add-on to a newspaper, usually a magazine within the paper. But supplement here also suggests that the suffering shown in the paper is not central to the lives of the readers. It's just an add-on. To be fair to the readers, however, Duffy also offers us another reading of her stanza. One other interpretation is to suggest that the readers are not indifferent but saturated by such images given the scale of human suffering in the world. They have become desensitized. Duffy therefore is not presenting a straightforward argument but a nuanced representation of the general public and readership. The final lines describe the photographer flying out again to another war zone. He looks down at England with little emotion. By placing the photographer in the plane, Duffy alienates him from his fellow citizens. He feels no longer part of them. In the plane, looking down, England now looks small and the concerns of its people trivial compared to what he has witnessed in the wider world. The word impassively suggests he no longer has any emotion for England, or he is focused back on his job, which does not allow for emotion. Impassively might also suggest war has made him desensitized. By the end of the poem, the poet once more returns to a spiritual theme. Ironically, he would rather be in parts of the world in turmoil than stay in a country which by comparison has become a collection of dull routines like reading the Sunday supplements, baths, lunch and drinking beer. Yet the poem does not end pessimistically. There is admiration for the war photographer and the work that he does. Despite the public's indifference, the photographer has faith that his job is worthwhile and more than just earning a living. Like a priest, his work is a calling, a vocation. Let's look at the tone of the poem. The speaker is scornful at the general public's indifference, but is sympathetic and full of admiration for people like war photographers who risk their lives bringing the horror of war to the public's attention. The tone is also one of irony. There's lots of ironic comments throughout, as we've just explored. But another irony as well is the use of religion, because I think the poet is also asking, what is the ideology, or what motivates the photographer, or what keeps him sane and together after he has witnessed such horrors? And another point is that whether he is religious or not makes no difference, because he is a man of high principles and high morals in his wish to risk his own life to bring to the public the sufferings of others. And the poem does raise some important themes. It asks us to reflect on our own responses to the suffering of others. Do we genuinely care? And if so, is our emotional response momentary? And do we just get on with our ordinary lives like the readers that Duffy describes in the poem? Or perhaps we have become desensitized to the pain and suffering of others. The poem makes us consider as well, is giving to charity enough? Or should we be doing more? Duffy also compares the horror and chaos of the countries the photographer visits with the peaceful routines of people in England who are oblivious to the sufferings of others. The mood of the poem is one of reflection. The photographer is trying to make sense of his job and the world around him. He is trying to create structure from chaos, and the poem also uses a consistent structure of 4 6-line stanzas, each one ending in a rhyming couplet. The use of rhyme at the end emphasises the point the poet is making and sums up the rest of the stanza. I think this poem links really well with the poem Brooklyn Cop by Norman McCaig, because both involve descriptions of people involved in difficult and dangerous jobs. Also, both poems examine civilization and that very thin divide between civilization and chaos. If you haven't watched our video on Brooklyn Cop, don't forget to do so, as well as our other videos of poetry analysis. Carol Ann Duffy based this poem on her friendship with a war photographer. So she writes from the position of some experience of what the job involves. I hope you found this video helpful. If so, please subscribe and tell other people to subscribe as well, and also hit the like and ring the bell. Until next time, from Carol and me, write well.